Opinion. Donald Trump's tantrums. Lies. Overwhelming opinion amongst intelligentsia is that US President Donald Trump is throwing tantrums and lying through his teeth. His repeated claims from Washington, D.C., Cananiscus, the venue for G7 summit, and elsewhere have come under close scrutiny internationally. First big claim that President Trump made was to have successfully mediated between Bharat and Pakistan during the week-long conflict to avert a nuclear war. The two countries fought a limited war following daylight murder of 26 tourists in Pahalgam of Jammu and Kashmir by ISIS-sponsored terrorists in April 25, 2025. Yesterday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi categorically debunked President Trump's falsified claims from White House and outside. Neither was there any mediation, dialogue, nor intervention by President Trump to pause the armed conflict. Instead, Operation Sindhur was paused only at specific and desperate request of Pakistan military establishment through regular channels of communication after Bharat pounded its air bases deep. In fact, Trump had gone ahead and tweeted to claim his leadership role in dissuading the South Asian neighbors from going to a major nuclear war. Yesterday, President Trump went a step further and pointed out that international media did not write about his stellar role as peacenik between the arch-rivals. On the contrary, in his 35-minute telephonic conversation with Trump, Modi unambiguously stated that the latter had no role whatsoever. Indian Foreign Office readout by Secretary Vikram Misri clearly dismissed in the most certain terms any mediation by President Trump. What's laughable is that Donald Trump repeated his bombastic claim from the Oval Office that he stopped the war even after getting an earful from Modi. Second big claim of President Trump that trade deal between India and US was used as leverage to bring around Prime Minister Modi. Again, this has been outright dismissed by India. President Trump's suggestion that trade deal in the works between India and US leverage to prevent a larger war was again billed as preposterous and untrue. To drive home India's unambiguous position on war with terror-infested Pakistan, Modi firmly and politely declined Trump's invite to stop over in Washington, D.C. for a chat, citing prior commitments. One cannot recall if American president's invite was ever declined by Indian leadership in the past. Few things have been stated crystal clear to President Trump in the telephonic conversation whether he liked it or not. India will not and never accept mediation with Pakistan. This is key articulation of the country's policy as part of its strategic autonomy framework. Yet another point made was that funding, sponsoring and abetting terrorism will now on be considered war against India and not proxy war. And hence, Bharat reserves the right to hit back in a manner it deems fit. Thirdly, Jammu Kashmir is non-negotiable, integral to India, and only discussion could be on areas under illegal occupation of Pakistan. In last few weeks, India exercised maximum restraint in not taking on President Trump's claim either directly or indirectly. Yesterday's phone call between the two leaders reflected clarity in articulation of India's position. In parallel, General Asim Munir of Pakistan getting close to White House, having a closed-door lunch with President Trump is something that clearly indicates complete disruption in U.S. foreign policy under Republican presidency. Reports that President Trump promised hitherto denied defense technologies to Pakistan for using its territory to strike against Iran have their own implications. Old foreign policy hands have an independent analysis on the chain of events, including President Trump's claims that have been eventually denied by Indian Foreign Secretary Misri. Entire rulebook in diplomatic niceties has been consigned to dustbin by President Trump and his bunch of policy advisors from corporate world while dealing with presidents and prime ministers. Hosting General Asim Munir has its own nuances and messaging for sure. President Trump seems to have realized that General Munir could be deployed to push the American agenda in Asia. Using Pakistani air bases and army entry-exit points across 1,000-kilometer-long border with Iran will only expand the war theater between Israel and Iran. Courting Pakistan at most critical junctures has happened even in the past. Hence, Trump-Munir lunch may not have come as a big surprise for some Indian security hawks. Also, Donald Trump may be looking at a defunct and rudderless Pakistan as potential market for clinching transactional business deals as well as go down in human history with a Nobel Peace Prize courtesy Islamabad's leadership. One big suspicion is that American deep state may be playing dirty against Prime Minister Modi's decisive leadership as it had attempted to deny his re-election for a third Consecutive term. Cozying up of Pakistan military establishment with Republican White House may have come after a successful trade deal hammered out by Trump and Chinese Communist Party's iron-fisted President Xi Jinping. In ultimate analysis, President Trump comes out as an undependable ally for anyone including Bharat. Disruptions in equations with friends and foes may be treated with equanimity by the slippery Trump administration. Rising American societal unrest that has begun to show up in demonstrations and protests may only deepen, threatening the very idea of United States of America. American deep state and left-aligned lobbies entrenched over decades are bound to exploit the churn to their advantage. In the process, there's huge possibility of President Trump getting cornered. In the process, Trump may lose out on India. Swipe left for next video. Nanan, the author, is director and chief executive of nonpartisan New Delhi-based think tank, Center for Integrated and Holistic Studies. Views expressed in the above piece are personal and solely those of the author. They do not necessarily reflect News 18's views. Latest blogs.